I'm just wondering if you can kind of give us a little breakdown of, from kind of your standpoint and your experiences with Leah Bree and going to kind of, I think everyone kind of has a spiritual quest of meeting Francis Schaeffer. Actually, one of our former pastors, he studied under Francis Schaeffer for a couple weeks. And so that's how I kind of heard the name before. And so I was just wondering if you can kind of briefly give your story of up to that point.
Yes, I'd love to. It was such a formative time of my life that I always like talking about it. And it started really, well, I was raised in a Christian home, but I started asking questions when I was in high school. And I was really asking the most central question of all. I was just asking, how do we know Christianity is true? I'm attending a public high school where all the instruction is secular, all the teachers are secular. And I just start wondering, how do we know that what we think is true is really true? And unfortunately, I couldn't find any people who would answer that question. I talked to a university professor who was a Christian, and I just asked him point blank, why are you a Christian? And he said, works for me.
Wow.
That's it.
Right.
And I had a chance to talk to a seminary dean, and I thought I'd get something more substantial from him. But all he said was, don't worry, we all have doubts sometimes.
Wow.
As if it was a psychological phase.
Yeah.
Right. You'll get over answering those questions.
Yeah, you'll outgrow that. And so it was, at one point, I was about halfway through high school. I made a very intentional decision that if I don't have good reasons for knowing that Christianity is true, then I shouldn't say I believe it. I mean, you shouldn't say that about anything if you don't have good reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I very intentionally set aside my Christian upbringing and decided it was up to me to find out what was really true. And I literally started going down the hallway in the public high school I attended and pulling books off the philosophy shelf, because I thought, if maybe philosophers talk about this. If I can't get any living adults to answer the question, maybe these dead guys.
And we really do appreciate those dead guys now.
At least some of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, philosophy is where you ask these questions, isn't it? Like, what is truth?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it? And is there meaning to life? And is there a foundation for ethics? Or is it just, what's true for me, what's true for you?
Mm.
And I pretty rapidly decided that, well, if there's no God, the answer to all of these questions pretty much is no. There is no meaning to life. There is no foundation for ethics. We're just on a planet flying through space. It's everything's random and meaningless.
Which is a consistent kind of answer, right?
It's very logical, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Mm.
There's no God, then that seemed to me the logical conclusion. And I didn't want to avoid that conclusion. Some people just keep going to church for the social life or whatever.
Mm.
But if it wasn't true, I actually aspired to be like Bertrand Russell, the atheist philosopher who said that the modern person has to build, what did he say? They have to build their life on the scaffolding of unyielding despair.
Yeah.
But there's a certain honesty and courage about doing that. If there is no God, you should honestly face the nihilism, the meaninglessness that comes from that. So how did I end up at L'Abri, the ministry of Edith and Francis Schaeffer? I had lived in Europe when I was young, and I wanted to go back. So when I graduated from high school, I went back to Germany. And then through a series of strange events, which I won't go into because it's so long, I did end up going to L'Abri in Switzerland. And I was there to visit some relatives who were staying for the weekend. So sometimes people say, well, if you were not a Christian, why would you go to this Christian place? It's because I wasn't intending to go to a Christian place. I just wanted to see my relatives, because they said, hey, we're at this place for a weekend, come see us. So I was very impressed by L'Abri. I had never encountered apologetics before. I had never encountered anyone who gave reasons and arguments to support Christianity, to show that it was rationally supportable. That blew me away. I was just, it's just so new, something so different. And of course, also Francis Schaeffer is known for promoting the arts. And so his aesthetic sense, I was studying violin at the conservatory in Germany, Heidelberg, Germany. So his appreciation for the arts was really cool.
Yeah.
And and then to be honest, back then, this was 1971. To be honest, all the students were hippies. And in 1971, the hippies were the cool kids.
Yeah.
It seems like such a foreign concept today. Like it's almost a monastery. What I have in my mind. Our pastor said that he just randomly walked up from the hillside, and there's Schaeffer with his long socks planting something in a garden, and that just it does seem very like communal, and it's something that I think you have maybe now online with like going to a place and kind of revolving around a kind of a leader or a speaker, or you have fan pages. Is that kind of what it was like? Was this kind of like monastery type where you can kind of go and ask and answer the hard questions of life?
Yeah, I think that's a good description. He didn't start out with that as a plan. Schaeffer first went to Europe as part of Child Evangelism Fellowship, and it was so he was always an evangelist at heart. But when was up in the Swiss Alps, and when his 3 daughters went down the mountain to attend university, they would talk to fellow students, and students would ask them questions about God, and the girls would say, "You ought to talk to my dad." He's really good with questions like that. And so they'd take the little train up the Swiss Alp, and since it was so inaccessible, they would just spend the weekend or longer. And then they would go down back to school and tell their friends, and another group would come up and they'd tell their friends, until eventually they had students sleeping. Well, they weren't students yet, it wasn't structured, but they had university students sleeping in the hallways and on all the couches and on the balconies. And that's how it grew sort of organically into a program where people would actually come and live. And as their house got full, another couple would say, "We'd like to join you in this ministry." And they would buy a house down the street, and they would have students living with them. And then another couple would come and say, "We'd like to join the ministry." So L'Abri was just really a group of houses in the Swiss Alps. They're chalets. Everyone lives in a chalet. So there's a group of chalets just sprinkled through a little Swiss village.
Wow.
Yeah, and the idea was that you would come and actually be part of the community. Back to your thing about it being communal. Yeah, you would study half a day, and then you would just live in the community and share in the chores. You talked about Schaeffer being out in the garden. You'd help with the gardening or the cooking or the cleaning or whatever needed to be done, so that you were really part of the community.